Friday the 31st of December, 2021, New Year's Eve, and winter retreat crews coming together, almost all here. And Luang Por and Tan Gambiro just got back from Thailand, and they're not here tonight. They're just finishing up a short quarantine period upon coming back, so they'll be around tomorrow. And tonight we'll follow our tradition of staying up till midnight and bringing in the new year with some Paritta chanting. And so it's always good to have these markers or these new beginnings. And for anybody who wants to make a New Year's resolution, it's nice to make something that we can actually keep, that we can actually do, and we can feel good about it. Or we might want to make some aspirations to reform ourselves in some way, and that's always good. It's always good to do that. And also it's a special time for us because we're winding down and getting ready for our 3-month winter retreat period. And for the monastic community, that's a time when we can really just look directly, focus directly on more on the formal practice and the practices of being in solitude and not having those work periods that we have 9 months out of the year. And it's a much more quiet time in the monastery. And the theme will be just meditation, so that can be very broad. And really, of course, when we say the theme is meditation, then anything concerned with the Noble Eightfold Path could come up. Because when we talk about meditation or just about practice, in the end, it's just the whole path. And then it's like growing that tree, growing our own personal tree. Everybody's got perhaps got a different type of tree that they're growing. Some trees will grow quicker, some trees will grow more slowly. And sometimes the trees that grow more slowly are bigger and perhaps bear even more fruit. So it's like Venerable Ananda, the Buddha's personal attendant for so long, and there was bhikkhus who were finishing their practice and attaining the Dhamma quicker than Ananda. So Venerable Ananda was a stream enterer very early on, but then he didn't attain arahantship until after the Buddha had passed away. Because there was other great disciples who were finishing their practice much quicker than Ananda. But then the Buddha he didn't criticize Ananda for that. So Ananda finished his own practice in his own time. And in the meantime, that time of having been the Buddha's attendant for so long, it bared great fruit. And come in. You can come in. So thinking about Venerable Ananda, and Ananda he was a stream enterer, and thinking about some of those factors of stream entry. There's many different places where the Buddha talks about the factors of stream entry, and it's not so easy to say, like, a lot of times our mind might be like, well, who's a stream enterer, who's not a stream enterer, and I want to know if this monk or that person or that Ajahn is a stream enterer, because that'll give me maybe more confidence in them, or maybe like I want this or that Kruba Ajahn to declare these other Ajahns. I want to ask them, are they a stream enterer or not, and that'll sort of help me to know, oh yeah, maybe I can have more confidence in them, or we might have heard rumors that like, oh, maybe there was an Ajahn who maybe said like, oh, there's almost no Western stream enterers, so we might just turn our back on, say, like the Westerners think like, oh, I better go to Thailand and practice because I heard a rumor that maybe there's like almost no Western stream enterers. It's this extremely rare. We've turned stream entry into this extremely rare, kind of unbelievably difficult to attain state. So there's no way to know whether any of that is true. It's just the Dhamma is it's just like come and see. It's like ehipassiko, come and see for yourself. And the Buddha, he defines stream entry in so many different ways in the suttas that it's hard to point to any one particular state, like as stream entry. There's also like Dhamma followers and faith followers. That's a classification of being which is pre-stream entry, but one is still irreversibly on the path of Dhamma. There's even one place where the Buddha says, monks, even if these two sal trees had sufficient faith in me, I would declare them as stream enterers. And so it's not always really incredibly clear what the Buddha is defining as stream entry, but we can say that if the mind is irreversibly with the Dhamma and isn't going to turn away from that, can't turn away from the Dhamma, then perhaps that's one way of thinking about it. But as monks, we're very, very careful about how we talk about this, just because we don't want to get into overestimating ourselves as well. So just to be safe, consider that, oh yeah, we're just utter beginners, and just to be safe, we'll consider that. But at the same time, it's fun. It's important to contemplate these factors of stream entry as the Buddha talks about them, or as we have them in the suttas. So there's a couple ways to look at this. One is that there's the 4 factors of stream entry. That's irreversible faith and confidence in Buddha, in the Dhamma, in the Sangha, and then the well-established virtue that's dear to the noble ones. One is well-established in the virtues that are dear to the noble ones. That's also not that clearly defined, but we can assume it's the precepts, the 5 precepts, the 8 precepts, the 10 precepts, 227 precepts were well established in whatever precepts we're carrying or holding. And the mind has also seen the benefit of those precepts and is in line, and the mind is also in line with them. There's also another way to think about it is the 3 fetters that get abandoned. The 3 fetters that get abandoned at the time of stream entry, and that's the Sakkaya Ditthi, Silabbata Paramasa, and Vicikicca. Sakkaya Ditthi being translated as like personality view, or the sense of self, the coarse sense of self. The Silabbata Paramasa, which is attachment to rites and rituals, or attachment to precepts and practices, or one could even think of it as taking refuge in conditions. And Vicikicca, which is doubt. Doubt is an interesting one because that's also defined in a couple different ways. Doubt, one is that the doubt that's overcome is doubt about the efficacy of Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, and doubt about the reality of the Four Noble Truths and the Noble Eightfold Path. But another way it's defined as one no longer is perplexed about wholesome and unwholesome states. One is no longer has any doubt about what's right and wrong. I find that a bit more useful, thinking of doubt in that way. No longer in doubt about what's skillful and unskillful, no longer in doubt about what's right and wrong. So that's like a Dhamma compass. It's like having a very well-established moral compass, and that's also connected with virtue dear to the noble ones, that idea of the virtue dear to the noble ones. Then Silabhata Paramasa, this is an interesting one because it's attachment to rites and rituals, attachment to precepts and practices. And the particular attachment is there's a belief that a particular precept or practice in and of itself will liberate us. So say like reciting a certain mantra in and of itself will be liberating, or doing chanting in and of itself is virtuous, or holding a certain set of precepts in and of themselves that'll be the very thing that liberates. So that's an interesting one, because we might think about that one as, maybe we shouldn't bow, we shouldn't chant, we shouldn't do any of those things because I don't want to have Silabhata Paramasa. And yet, it's a bit more nuanced than that, because we can also ritually not bow and not chant, thinking that in and of itself, not bowing and not chanting and not doing the rituals is going to liberate. That's also Silabhata Paramasa. So it's really important to understand that. And Sakkaya Ditthi, this is the sense of me and mine. This body is me and mine. This mind is me and mine. So that's one way of thinking about Sakkaya Ditthi, and so that falls away. It's said that falls away at the time of stream entry. And when I think about that one, I kind of connect that also with the teaching that a stream enterer overcomes fear of death. Because if that's connected with the letting go of that fetter of Sakkaya Ditthi, because the Sakkaya Ditthi, it's if we take the body as me and mine, then when the body dies, that's me dying, that's I'm losing my body, or the mind too. When we grow old and start to lose our mental faculties, that's a big fear. It's a big fear. Many of us, many people will have that fear. Well, I don't mind getting old. I don't mind losing the bodily strength and energy or whatever, but I'm really afraid of losing my mind, getting dementia, getting Alzheimer's. That's a big fear. So not only is the body not me, not mine, but also the mind is not me, not mine. So that's the Sakkaya Ditthi, where we take those things to be something that belongs to us, or either is me or is belonging to me. So that's, if we think about that what would it be like to actually drop those things? It'd be the most incredible lightness, the most incredible relief. And so that's something worth thinking about, something worth aiming for. It's just so important to consider those things. Another way we can think about this or try to understand this is that in the suttas it talks about like an arhant, and for an arhant it would never occur to them, I am an arhant. So So if any of us have that thought, we can be sure that we're not arhants. That's a really good marker. If anyone thinks, I am an arhant, you can rest assured you're not an arhant. It does not occur to them. And even more so if somebody goes up to you and says, I'm an arhant. So to take that at the outset. The practice, it progresses in a very natural way. And if the mind is going to extremes, then that's also something to look out for. I remember sitting at one New Year's Eve. It was 2012. So there was this kind of rumor going around that like something really bad was going to happen in 2012. Like maybe either the world was going to end or there was going to be a big disaster or something. And there was this idea that was going to be the case. So I was really happy when we got to New Year's Eve, where it was the last day of 2012. Like, okay, if we get past 2012, then we're going to be okay. And I remember sitting up till midnight, New Year's Eve 2012, and it was like 11:30 p.m. and I was feeling really happy that we actually made it through 2012, and thinking, okay, we're going to be okay. Nothing bad is going to happen. And then suddenly the Dhamma hall started like shaking. And it was like 11:45, and it's like it started shaking. And I thought, oh, well, maybe not. We don't really know if we're going to make it still. And we're on a fault line here. The Laughlin Fault we're in an earthquake zone here. So there was just a very minor earthquake, and then it was okay. But I thought, oh, maybe something really bad is still going to happen. But it's easy to get into that rut too, like, oh, something really bad is going to happen, or like maybe everything's gonna be destroyed somehow or fall apart, and everything's gonna end all of a sudden, or there's gonna be a huge catastrophic event somehow. So it's always kind of, but that's the mind going to extremes. So things are actually very ordinary, and in a way, you could say, yeah, everything is headed for destruction. Everything is degenerating. Everything is it's entropy. Everything is deteriorating, and the body is getting older. It's good to contemplate old age. When we're young, we're born, we're little babies. And I was at my parents' house yesterday. They were offering the meal, and there's a picture of myself when I was a newborn baby. Just looking at this picture I must have been maybe 2 weeks old or something, and clinging to my dad's chest. And so we're little babies, and then we grow up, and toddlers and children, and then we get older, and teenagers we go through as young adults, as adults, and then we grow older. We go through middle age, and then old age, and then at a certain point we're very old, and then we're very, very old, and then at a certain point we pass away. And not everybody reaches old age, so Some people pass away at younger ages as well. It can happen. It can actually happen at any time. It's uncertain. So when we look at these things, we look at impermanence. Say the Buddha talking about the factors of stream entry, he talks about, and when he talks about that Silabbata Paramasa, Sakaya Ditti and Vicikicca, that the personality view, the attachment to rites and rituals, and doubt passes away at stream entry. It's not that we have to focus necessarily on overcoming those three things, but those are the three things that fall away when impermanence is seen clearly for the first time. So it's like when the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta was given, the first discourse of the Buddha was given, then Anya Kondanya, at the end of the discourse, they say he sees impermanence, his Dhamma eye, the Dhammacakku, the Dhamma eye opens, and he sees that everything that has the nature to arise has the nature to cease, and reaches stream entry through that insight. So this very simple insight in the story that Luang Por tells of going to see his family after, I think he was in Thailand for something like, 9 years or possibly even like 16 years, I can't remember. But he hadn't seen his family for a long time and went home for the first time to Canada to see his family, and then one of his relatives, maybe his brother, asking him like, well, what is it like about Buddhism? How can you summarize Buddhism? And he answered, well, insight into impermanence. And then it's like, his brother is kind of like, well, that's kind of stupid. Like, everybody knows that. Everybody knows that things are impermanent. But actually not, actually we don't know it in the right way. We don't truly know it. We still have that. It's like we're still holding out hope for something to be lasting. We're still holding out hope for something to give us true happiness, some sort of condition to give us true happiness. We're still holding out hope for that. So then, with that insight into everything that is the nature to arise is of the nature to cease, with that insight, then the mind would recoil from taking refuge in conditions, taking refuge in things that have the nature to arise and cease. That's the implication of that insight. So we're here just for that very ordinary realization, the true nature of the body and mind. Can we get to a point where the mind isn't holding out hope that there's going to be something lasting that we can hold on to? In traditional Buddhist cultures, I know this is like in Tibetan culture, then in the old days, then they would teach their children about impermanence at a very early age, and get that even children or like young monks, or children who became novices at a very young age, what they would learn about is impermanence. And say, okay, well, even at a young age, don't forget that life will end at some point, and that isn't meant to be depressing or meant to make us feel bad. That's not the idea with the death contemplation. But it's like a sense of being very realistic and very sober about it. And So it might happen that sometimes we do experience some happiness, and when the mind is wholesome, when the mind is lets go of thoughts of harming or thoughts of ill will, then the mind will experience some modicum of happiness, and that's good. That's good. That's a factor of meditation. We talk about these states of piti sukha that we want. So we want to meditate and experience bliss and happiness. We want to meditate and experience things like piti sukha. So those will be a natural result of the mind becoming wholesome. So as we go about the practice, then how do we actually make the mind more wholesome, more skillful? And the Buddha talks about that, the second factor of the path, which is right thought or right intention. So thoughts of non-harming, thoughts of non-ill will, thoughts of renunciation. Renunciation is defined as thoughts of not taking refuge in sense desires from the five physical sense bases. So right thought, that leads to happiness and well-being. We can also think of thoughts of non-harming and thoughts of non-ill will as thoughts of loving kindness and compassion. Thoughts of non-ill will would be loving kindness or metta, and thoughts of non-harming would be compassion or karuna. And then the thoughts of renunciation, that's nekkhamma sankappo, that's the nekkhamma, which is renunciation is probably a pretty good translation for it. But we could also think about it as not getting involved. Like a nekkhamma is like a non-involvement, because when we think of renunciation, the word renunciation implies like maybe getting rid of something. But that sense of stepping back from or not getting involved in, that can also be one way to think of nekkhamma. So like thoughts of sense desire or thoughts of sensuality, when we get involved with them, that can make the mind hot and bothered. And that's a state of dukkha. So it's the way sensuality tricks us, is that we experience it's an unpleasant state that when we fulfill it, or when we follow it, when we take its advice and feed it, then that unpleasant state will subside. That's the trick of sensuality. So it's also nekkhamma would be coupled with panya as well, because we need at least enough clear seeing to say, well, that's not the case, it never has been the case. The desire doesn't go away when it's fulfilled. It just starts looking somewhere else, because tanha, or the desire by its very nature, it can't be fulfilled. If it could be fulfilled, it wouldn't be desire. So desire by its very nature can't ever be fulfilled. So when we look at something like the Buddha talks about kama tanha, bhava tanha, vibhava tanha, that these types of tanha, they're all tanha. They're all tanha, but they're seen. It's tanha, but seen from different angles. Bhava tanha, the desire to become, that's also vibhava tanha. I think when the Buddha's teaching, he's dealing directly with different energies. So the Buddha is trying to formulate his teaching after his awakening and thinking, well, what is it? What is it that actually drives people? So he's thinking, well, it's kama tanha, it's also bhava tanha and vibhava tanha. It's kind of threefold. Bhava tanha, if we have bhava tanha, it's also vibhava tanha, because when we're moving into something or we're becoming something, we're also not becoming something else. It's also bhava tanha overlaps with kama tanha as well, because when we're trying to get something, we're also trying to we're kind of becoming into that state as well. There's a lot of overlaps. So we can think of all this, we can roll it all together as just tanha. And tanha, I think it's, in the teachings, it's always considered as being unwholesome. But then there's chanda, that's also desire, which is a necessary factor of practice. Chanda can be wholesome or unwholesome. And that's like if we have kama chanda, that's like a drive for sensuality, so that would be something that would be considered unskillful. But then we have dhamma chanda, which is the impetus or the drive for the dhamma, for the spiritual. So, and that's something that's necessary. And if we don't have that desire for the Dhamma, then we don't really move, we don't really do the practice. It doesn't just happen automatically. We need that. We need that Dhamma chanda to sort of push us forward. These are at least a few thoughts to push us forward, at least until midnight tonight. Midnight tonight. Midnight tonight. Midnight tonight.